When I say lockdown, where does your mind go first? A school being sealed up with all the lights out? Or maybe a prison when inmates aren't meeting the guards' expectations? Is it the widespread stay-at-home orders so commonly seen and heard during the current COVID-19 pandemic? No matter what you associate with that word, you can be assured that there are plenty of scary stories to go along with it. Lockdowns don't happen for happy, fun reasons and don't often result in a whole lot of positivity. It makes sense that there's a wealth of horror that goes along with them. Hello horror heads, and welcome back to the scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. I'm your horror host Keegan Hughes, and today we're going to be counting down the top 5 scary lockdown stories. Before we get going, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more trapped terrors. Perfect, let's begin. Coming in at number 5, we've got giving birth during lockdown. Giving birth is a scary enough prospect to begin with. I don't have a uterus, so I can't even begin to imagine what forcing a tiny human out of one's body might be like. However, from listening to the experiences of birth-giving parents, it is largely unpleasant and terrifying. And throughout history, many mothers have passed away during birth, adding to these scary associations surrounding giving life to a baby. So when an expectant mother realized she was going to be in labor while the country was on lockdown, she was understandably afraid. Rose Wilson had originally planned to give birth in a very controlled environment, even opting into a hypnobirth experience. She hoped that it would be quite calm and serene. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. She was rushed to the hospital as the country went into lockdown, and soon after things became very dramatic. Laws and rules surrounding COVID were changing rapidly at the time, and expectations varied widely. Originally, her partner was allowed to stay in the ward, but soon after was told that he had to leave post-birth. Nurses came in wearing full PPE, giving a very medical and somewhat dystopian vibe to Rose's labor. And to make things worse, she had to be put under for an emergency C-section. Talk about the opposite of calm and serene. Thankfully, after all was said and done, the baby was delivered happy and healthy. Although Rose had to stay in the hospital for 3 days and was only allowed to contact her family via FaceTime. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Hallucinations Scare. Schools across the USA have been attempting to implement lockdown drills in order to keep their students safe in exceptional situations. While most deal with some sort of active gunman, nobody would have predicted what happened at Wapato Middle School. Back in September of 2019, 7 students caused a lockdown and had to be removed from the premises. Apparently, they had somehow acquired a hallucinatory drug and ingested it. The substance caused them to act very strangely, which eventually elevated to the point of requiring a lockdown. Other students were told that it was indeed a real lockdown and they were to hide until everything was safe once again. Nobody really knows where the drugs came from, but preteens and hallucinogens aren't a healthy mix. Substances like that can make people unpredictable, and in a school environment, that's bad news. The lockdown was likely to ensure the safety of the students who were hallucinating more than anything, but it probably helped keep their peers safe as well. In the end, 4 of the 7 who ingested tabs were brought to the hospital. To make matters worse, more tabs were found after the fact, prompting teachers to continue to look for them. Community members claim that it's more common than one would think. I don't know about anyone else, but tripping in middle school doesn't sound like a good time. White walls, narrow hallways, a bunch of teachers and peers. Who thought that was a good idea? Coming in at number 3, we've got gods of death. Not literal ones, unfortunately, but folks trying to enforce lockdown measures. If you were to visit the town famous for mining in the Indian district of Madhya Pradesh, you might have run into a terrifying visage. Clad in black, wearing golden headgear and wielding a mace, the coal miner took it upon himself to punish those floating lockdown rules. Folks all over the place have been ignoring social distancing rules and running about town, so workers from the Coal India Arm Western Coalfields Limited organized street plays to inform the public, as well as put a little fear in them. Employees of the coal company would put on performances featuring frontline workers like police and nurses, all while pretending to be gods of death and classifying those ignoring lockdown rules as sinners. While the god of death calling you a sinner might have implications in the afterlife, Indian police catching you breaking the rules can actually make you wish that Yamraj actually did take you away. During India's 21-day lockdown at the outset of the pandemic, people caught breaking rules would be forced to do all sorts of things. Police would make people do push-ups, sit-ups, and squats out in the streets, and in some cases would even violently cane violators. Some have praised the police for their creative handling of the situation, but others claim that doing so is a violation of human rights. I suppose these two groups can keep arguing for now, as the god of death will make the final judgment. Coming in at number 2, we've got the lockdown creepypasta. Returning for a moment to school lockdowns, I'm sure that every student has a personal lockdown nightmare that they'd be happy to share. Whether real or imagined, it's easy to see how a situation like that could be horrifying to a young learner. So it makes sense that creepy fictional stories featuring lockdowns would emerge. One such tale comes from the Dead Canary and is featured on Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. In The Lockdown, a narrator walks us through a harrowing experience they had back in school. The entire school and were looking for someone that could look like anyone. That's odd. Soon, the police intercepted someone, guns cocked and ready to fire. Following this, there was an ungodly scream. The kind of scream that makes you want to run away forever, and then when you run out of energy, crawl into a ditch. The police gunned whatever was screaming down, resulting in way more blood than the narrator expected. Soon after, the lockdown ended and everyone was sent home. That night, they turned on the news to see what had happened. It was being reported that there was a student shooter and he had been arrested following a firefight. Arrested and brought out, uninjured. Which was strange considering all the blood they had saw. It could look like anyone, huh? So what was it, and why were they in the school? Were those real police? Best not to think about it. And finally, at number 1, we've got lockdown ghosts. Here's a tricky question. If you found out your house was haunted during lockdown, would you be happy or terrified? It would definitely provide a fascinating way to pass the time, provided that you ended up with a friendly phantom. A malicious presence would be a whole other can of worms. The New York Times compiled a whole bunch of purported ghost stories from lockdown and published a story highlighting some of the most compelling. Before I list a few off, there are some different explanations that have arisen to explain these strange phenomena. Number 1 is that when people stay home all day, they aren't likely used to the sounds a house might make when they're usually away. This could explain why some folks are hearing and potentially seeing odd things. Another explanation stems from how we respond to times of great unease. The weirder we feel, the greater the need to find meaning in chaos becomes. So as people feel odd about the pandemic and resultant lockdowns, we may attribute many strange things to paranormal causes. Alright, so now that we've considered why this happens, let's hear some ghost stories. A man named Adrian Gomez started to notice that his doorknob was rattling so loud that you could hear it anywhere in the apartment. After this, a window shade started shaking violently despite the window being closed. Nobody lives above him, but he can hear distinct footsteps at all hours. Another person claimed that all sorts of lost items were being returned during lockdown, likely from a mischievous but friendly ghost. Camera lenses and keys that were thought to have been long gone were suddenly found in obvious places where they definitely hadn't been before. Nobody has reported anything too violent or scary, but to spend all of your time in a house cohabitated by a ghost must be tough. What do you think? Worth it? How'd you like the list? Are there any lockdown stories you've heard that chill you to the bone? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's have a look at some of your more enthusiastic ones from the top 5 SCP monsters that can never escape, part 21. Dr. Adderman says, stop implying you might be anomalous, we all know you're an SCP. Thankfully, nobody's secured, contained, or protected me at this point. Here's hoping I maintain some semblance of freedom. Eric Pitzer says, if my SO gave me a ring made of his and or my blood, I would lock it in immediately and get him/her one too. Taking Beyonce's advice, eh? Good on ya, putting a ring on it and all. Caitlin Stroud says, if you don't mind, can I get pinned? Please, you guys are amazing. I find the best way to get pinned is to take up wrestling. Let me know how it goes. SCP Gamer says, sick jacket, Keegan. Where did you get it? What's the brand called? It was a thrift store find, unfortunately. It's a 1996 Olympic jacket. I think it was made by Starter. And Null Snaggle says, how do you think of the things you say at the end of your videos? I close my eyes really tight and then a demon whispers them in my ear. And that's all the time we have for today. Before I fly to the moon and then subsequently swing among the stars, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more snow-covered stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.